Has anyone ever been in a situation where you're just like, God, where you're just like, God, I'm going to need you to come in clutch right now? Has anyone ever been in a situation like, Jesus, I need you to take the wheel? Like, God, I don't know what I'm doing right now, so I'm going to need you. Has anyone ever been there somewhat? For me, I had this bad habit in high school. It's called not studying. And so it was always like a biology test, and as the teacher was passing them out and handing them around, eventually it would get to me, and I would look to God, and I'd act surprised, and I'd be like, oh, well, hey, God, like you read 3 questions down, you're like, I'm underqualified for this. And you just pray for like the divine knowledge of God to make up for your lack of, I cannot be the only one who has done this, please. All right, cool. But maybe it's not, as glamorous of a time. Maybe there's been a time where it's actually been a difficult season, and you've reached out to God and just said, God, if I'm going to get through this, like, I need you, because I don't know what else to turn to. And so with that, I'm going to share 2 stories of my own, if that's okay. And we're going to get personal. I'm going to open up, if I'm being honest. And I'm going to start off with probably what might be one of the most tragic times in my life. I was 5 years old in kindergarten, and it was nap time. Did anyone else have nap time in their kindergarten? I went to like a small school, so I don't know if it's just me. Yeah, some nap time? Let's go. Okay, good. So first off, no one sleeps in nap time, right? Did anyone actually take a nap during nap time? Of course. All right, whatever. No one actually. All right, well, I did not sleep during nap time. And so one time I was bored, and I'm like, I'm not taking a nap. And so me and my friend, we go over to this table, and it had like the big Lego bricks on it. Y'all ever play with those growing up? And so he laid on one side of the table, I laid on the other side of the table, and I'll just lay in there, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Until I see his hand reach up and snag one. And I'm like, what just happened? And all of a sudden I look over, and he throws it at me. And I catch it, and I hold on to it. And I throw it back at him. And I throw it back at him. And we just keep going back and forth under the table. And like, this is great. This is fun. Like, we're not supposed to be doing this. We're supposed to be sleeping, right? It's nap time. But it felt great. And so it was one thing to do to pass the time. And so all of a sudden he throws it, hits the table leg. And I collapse to the floor. Is anyone like 3 a.m., you're on your Nintendo DS, and then your mom walks in the room, you got like, boom, I'm asleep, right? Is anyone... Wasn't there like a challenge in like 2017 where like you just drop to the floor? Not like the mannequin challenge, but like you just... That's it. That's what we did. I was 5 years old. We just dropped. And we pretend to be sleeping. We're looking over at each other. And then I go up and I look to see if the coast is clear. The teacher's sitting right there. And so I look up and I make direct eye contact with the teacher. And she said, Jared... And I tried to play it off like I was asleep. I was like, yeah, she was not buying it at all. And so she begins her walk over to the board. Now, I don't know if you guys had a board. This is our behavior board. And I don't know if you guys had this, but every day you walk in, you start on green. If you did something bad, you get flipped to yellow. If you did something real bad, then you'd be turned to red. She walks over to the board. And the one time in my entire kindergarten career, she takes my little color and she flipped it to yellow. And to be honest, I couldn't care less. Until after nap time, she says, Jared, because it's your first yellow, I'm going to have to call your parents. And I said, whoa. There is no need to be calling my parents. I was not scared of my kindergarten teacher. I was terrified of my mom, okay? And so she walks over to the phone. She dials my home phone number, picks it up, says, Mrs. Baldwin. And I cried out, Lord, if there's ever been a time that I need you, it's right now. I need you to carry me through. And so the teacher's like, your son wasn't sleeping during nap time. My mom was like, I don't care. And then she hung up the phone. So it was fine. We ended up being okay. But I said, Lord, I'm going to need you to bring me through this. And he did. Let me give you one more story. This one, a bit of a different tone. I was about 14, 15 years old. And has anyone ever had a season where it's like you just don't want to get up in the morning? We just lay in bed, that alarm's going off, and it's just like, I can't be bothered today. For me, it was like that, but a little different. For me, I had a season where I didn't really want to go to sleep at night because I didn't really want to wake up in the morning. And it was a tough season. I think that I just It felt like everything around me just kind of, like a lot of things were just being ruined. It felt like I lost hope. It felt like I just didn't have any options, didn't really see a way forward. And so I would stay up late so that I could avoid going to bed because I didn't want to wake up. And it came to a point where I was staying up late praying to God because I didn't know what else to do. And I said, God, if this is me living my life, then I don't want to live it anymore. So I'm just going to give it to you. And that, in just the same way, is a cry out for help. It's a cry out to God, saying, God, I'm going to need you to bring me through this. And so with that, I wanted to preach a message tonight titled, you ready for the title? It's always been God. It's always, how's that sound? Does that sound good? It has always been God. Because every season when I look back at my life, every hardship, every trial, every struggle, as I look back, I see one thing, that it has always been God. Before we dive into the text, let's pray. So today we're going to be talking and looking into a character called Jeroboam. Has anyone ever heard of Jeroboam before? We familiar? Kind of? Is anyone, New or Old Testament? Does anybody know? Old Testament? Good, okay. I'm actually surprised. I was expecting nobody to know who Jeroboam was. And so I had this whole section on context of like who he is, but I'm going to just run through it anyway. Has anyone heard of King David? All right, we've heard of King David. So I'm going to try to explain who Jeroboam is. We're going to start at King David. So King David, in the Bible, he's the second king of Israel, right? After Israel decides that we want to adopt the king, they choose a guy. After that guy wasn't great, we have David. David was good. He was written to be a man after God's own heart. And he was a good king, right? Great king. And so David, he has a son named Solomon. Solomon, written to be the wisest man alive, right? Two very big things about Solomon. He's written to be the wisest man alive. And then there's something else that's kind of unique about Solomon. Does anyone know the second little fun fact about Solomon? He had a ton of women, dude, like a lot of them. And so God appears to Solomon. Solomon builds the temple. God appears to Solomon. And God says to Solomon, King Solomon at this time, he says, Solomon, hey, look, I will bless you. I will be with you. My presence will go before you. I will guide you if you follow my commands. And Solomon followed the women. And it didn't work out amazing for him, right? I don't know, that's what happened. And so what we see is that Solomon kind of ended up walking away from God and not following God and not following his commands. And so God ends up telling him, Solomon, I'm going to take the kingdom away from you. God tells the king, I'm going to take the kingdom away from you. But because, Solomon, your father David was so faithful to me, I will not do it in your lifetime. And God upholds his promise. Solomon lives and dies as king, and afterwards his son Rehoboam becomes king. Not to be confused with Jeroboam, we'll get there in a second, but Solomon's son Rehoboam becomes now the king of Israel. And so with this new king, all of Israel gathers around. They say, hey, you know, your dad Solomon, he was kind of hard on us, so would you mind just kind of like easing it up a bit? And Rehoboam's like, nah, not going to do that. And so all of Israel, I kid you not, this is 1 Kings 11 if you want to read it. And all of Israel is like, all right, then we're just going to leave. And that's what Israel does. The 12 tribes of Israel, out of the 12, 10 of them just leave. We have 2 who decide to stay under Rehoboam. They decide to stay in the house of David, the family line of David. But the other 10 tribes decide to go make the new Israel as a nation. And with this new nation, they say, we're going to need a king. Enter, anyone know who that new king is? Jeroboam. So that's where we get Jeroboam. He's the king of the split off Israel. And so actually, before we jump to the text, we're going to be diving into a passage that's right before he became king. So in the timeline, he has not become king yet, but he is about to. Let's go ahead and jump in. In 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 28. About that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him on the way, wearing a new cloak. The 2 of them were alone out in the country, and Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. Then he said to Jeroboam, take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. So basically we have our guy Jeroboam. He's out on a walk, and as he's walking, there's a prophet that comes and meets him, and he's wearing a new cloak. And when the prophet sees him, he just rips his clothes off, which is a weird greeting, you could say, right? But he rips it into 12 pieces, and he says, hey, I want you to take 10, because the Lord is going to make you king. He's telling that it has not happened yet, but the Lord is going to make you king. You are going to be king. God has a plan for you. I don't know, was anyone here for the Joseph sermon that I did a few weeks ago? I think a few of us are returners. That's okay, even if you weren't. But what we saw at the very beginning of Joseph's story is something kind of similar. God gave Joseph a dream. And in that dream, God promised Joseph, I have something amazing planned for you. Joseph, I have a great purpose for your life. You can't see it right now, but I have something amazing for you. That's what he told Joseph at the very beginning, right? You remember that? And this is essentially what's happening to Jeroboam as well. As he's on the road, this prophet comes up to him who's speaking for God, and he says, Jeroboam, you are going to be king. God has something amazing planned for you. But, there's a but. It's a little but. Well, actually, in the NIV, it's a however. I don't know if there's a difference. I don't know if you prefer one or the other. Does anyone prefer howevers? Does anyone prefer buts? All right, actually, clear demographic split on this one. So anyway, if we keep reading. So the prophet says, Jeroboam, you are going to be king. However, let me go and pick it up, 1 Kings 11, verse 37. And this is God speaking to Jeroboam through the prophet. This is God speaking to Jeroboam. However, as for you, I will take you, and you will rule over all that your heart desires. You will be king over Israel. If you do what I command and walk in obedience to me, and do what is right in my eyes by obeying my decrees and commands as David my servant did, I will be with you. And I will build a dynasty as enduring as the one I built for David, and will give Israel to you. So what God is saying is, Jeroboam, I have called you to be king. What does he have to do? Follow me. That's all God is saying. It's actually, let me say it like this. God is telling Jeroboam, listen, your calling is not to be king. Maybe you're thinking, Jared, what did you just say? Hold on, hear me out. Jeroboam's calling is not to be king. His calling is to follow God and obey his commands. God is saying, Jeroboam, you are going to become king, but what I want you to do is follow me. He's not putting Jeroboam in a position of authority. He's not asking him to be put in a position of authority. He's asking him to put himself in a position of worship and obedience. God's saying, listen, Jeroboam, your placement is to be king, but I want you to be mine. That's what God is saying to Jeroboam. The calling is not to be king. The calling is to follow God. And you know what I love about this? Is that it's the same thing today. If you think about it. I know some of the people in this room, and even if I don't know you that well, what I do know is that God has a plan for you. That's promised. Before you were even born, the whole plan of your life was written out by God. And he says, hey, look, I have something amazing for you. Maybe you want to go medical field, education field. Maybe you want to go call the ministry, go be a pastor. Maybe you're just really hoping that your podcast will blow up so you can do that full time. I hope. But anyway, right? But whatever that calling is, God's saying, listen, I have a plan for you. But your calling, God says, is 2 words. Follow me. And if you get anything else from the message, that's really important to take away. God's saying, Jeroboam, you're going to be king. But what I want from you is to follow me. And so, the question is, what did Jeroboam do with this call? Let's take a vote. How many think that he was a great king and handled this amazingly? How many do not think that he handled this amazing? All right, yeah, we're on agreement here. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look. So I just want to paint this picture really quick so that it makes a little bit more sense for you. So basically, here's what happened now. We're going to pick up a little bit later in the storyline. Jeroboam has just become king of Israel. Why? Because all these 10 tribes looked at Rehoboam and they said, No, we don't want to be under him. And so they go to Jeroboam and they say, we want you to be our king. That's what they just told him. We said, we want you to be king. We are choosing you to be king. We don't want to go with that guy. We want you to be king. And so now he's king. And let's read the first thing that Jeroboam does as soon as he becomes king. In 1 Kings 12, verse 25, Jeroboam thought to himself, the kingdom will now likely revert to the house of David. If these people go up and offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, they will again give their allegiance to the Lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam. I can't exactly tell you why. Because God promised Jeroboam, I'm going to make you king. I'm going to put you in this position. I'm going to give you these 10 tribes. And all of the people just said, we want you to be king. We don't want to follow that guy. But as soon as he becomes king, his first fear is that everyone's going to go back to the house of David. Why? Because of their religion. He says as soon as they go up to offer sacrifices in the temple, they're going to go back to Rehoboam, who they just left. He's worried that they're going to go back to their ex. And he hasn't even been in a 1-week relationship with them. That's what he's doing. He's saying, I'm worried they're going to go back to where they just came from. And so let's go ahead and keep reading what he does. Picking up in verse 28. After seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. So here are your gods, Israel, who brought you out of Egypt. So Jeroboam makes these golden calves. Not to be confused like my mom was when I told her what I was preaching about. She said, you're going to be talking about Jared Baldwin and the golden calves. And I said, no. So Jeroboam, King Jeroboam, he makes these golden calves. And what he says here is, hey, Israel, do you remember that God who brought your ancestors out of Egypt? The God who, he saw your people in slavery and captivity, and he delivered them from that. Well, guess what? These are your gods now. And he made these 2 golden statues, these 2 golden images, and he held them up. He said, Israel, these are your gods now. So not only did Jeroboam, as soon as he became king, a position in which God put him in, not only did he immediately choose to walk away from God and away from the calling that God gave him, but also he is leading the entire nation away with him. Do we see this picture that's being painted in this story? Because here's the thing. That's exactly what the world does to us today. Jeroboam was worried that the religion of the people would draw them away from him. And so he just made up a new religion. Because he said, no, I want them to stay loyal to me. And so what he did, and I think what the world does to us today, is he did everything he could to make God's people sound crazy for believing in God. Does that sound familiar, maybe, at all? Because the world today, as soon as you leave this building, as soon as you walk off this campus, especially if you go up north, I know down south we're all kind of Southern and Christian here, but as soon as you go up north, there's going to be a lot of people who will make you feel crazy for what you believe. There's going to be a lot of people who would tell you that this book right here, it's a bunch of fairy tales. It's not real. There are going to be a lot of people who tell you God's not real. Some people even tell you that God's dead. They're going to look you in the eyes and question you. And they're going to ask you, you can't possibly believe that, can you? And you know what I say? You know what I think? I think that every word in this book is true. And it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. More than that, I think that every word in this book is truth. And you can ask me why? Why? Because I believe that God is real. Why? Why do I believe that God is real? Because there was a 14-year-old boy who had no hope, who didn't want to go on, who saw no way forward. And Jesus became my hope and made a way forward. It was a few months after I prayed that prayer that I accepted a call to ministry, where I said, God, I'm going to spend the rest of my life serving you. Because a life without God is not one that I want to live. Because I remember trying. And so I want to spend the rest of my life trying to share that same hope that I found. And that hope is Jesus, and Jesus alone. You know who Jesus is? He's the kind of God who can deliver you out of Egypt. And he did. Your own little Egypt. He's the kind of God that can calm the storms of anxiety. He's the kind of God that can bring deliverance from depression, not some golden calves. Don't you dare try to tell me that some golden calves are the things that brought me out of Egypt. Because I remember my Egypt. I remember the chains that I was shackled to. I remember not being able to move. I remember seeing no way forward. And it was no golden calves that brought me out. It was God. So don't you dare try to tell me that it was some golden calf that brought me through when I know that it was God. Because who is God? He's the kind of God who can give hope when there is none. He's the kind of God who can make a way when there is none. He's the kind of God who can bring light to any situation, it doesn't matter how dark. He's the kind of God who can part the sea. He's the kind of God who when you're the Babylonians and you throw 3 of God's people in the fire, what do you see? 4. That's who Jesus is. And that's who he's always been in our life. Because when I look back, I'm reminded of one thing. That it's always been God. The reason I'm here is not because of my own decisions. If it was my own decisions, I wouldn't be here. The reason I'm here is not because of other people. It's because God brought me here. It's because God had a plan. That, thank goodness, was better than my own. But as I look back at my life, I see in every difficult season that God was there. However, for some people, that's not true. Maybe it was a divorce, and you think, where was God? Maybe you know somebody who went through something, and they're going to ask you, where was God in that? I lost someone close to me. That wasn't God. My parents were divorced. That wasn't God. I was abused. That wasn't God. Fill in the blank. There are some things that have happened that people cannot explain. But God had a plan. And he has a plan for you. How do I know that? Because you're here. Because we're still kicking. We're still going. Which means that God's not done yet. And whatever God's plan is for you, whatever career you decide to take, whatever field you go into, whatever job you pick up, don't forget about God, like Jeroboam. Because he never left you. He never forgot about you. So let me read this. Whatever the plan is, don't forget the calling. The calling summed up like this. Let me take it, Matthew 16, verse 24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." The world's going to put all kinds of things in front of you and say, these are your gods. Might be a trophy, might be money, might be fame, might be success. But nothing, nothing can replace God. And so as you leave, remember the calling. 2 simple words. Follow me.